Hello, I'm Sarah Grady Ackerman. Harvey Oyer now joins me. His children's book, The Adventures of Charlie Pierce, The Last Egret, is a bronze medal winner in this year's Florida Book Awards. Welcome, Harvey, and
Thank
congratulations.
You, Sarah. Thank you very much.
You know, just to start off, looking at your resume, what I really admire is that you are an adjunct professor, you're a partner in a law firm, you have your master's in archaeology, you served as captain in the U.S. Marine Corps, and then the very next line will be, as a hobby, you write children's books. They just don't seem to line up. How did you get into writing children's literature?
Well, you know, I have a lot of different intellectual interests, and I never thought children's literature would be one of them, but I have a great passion for Florida, the history of Florida, the people, the culture of Florida, and I had in my head this notion of sharing that with others. And I had on my bucket list of things to do before I died to write a book about my knowledge of Florida, and in particular my family's participation in the development of Florida. But when I got around to writing the book, I thought, where would this book be most useful? Would it be useful to write it for our generation or for the next generation? Those young Floridians who might have a better opportunity to grasp the concept of the unique special place that Florida is and grow up to be better educated voters and public office holders and treat our unique ecosystem, water supply, and history maybe a little bit better than our generation.
Well, I love where that comes. I respect that greatly. You mentioned your deep passion and respect for Florida's history, and I imagine that comes from being a fifth generation Floridian. Your family, as I understand, your great-great-grandparents moved to Southeast Florida in 1872,
yes.
Correct? And this is actually the same time and setting of your book. So that's not a coincidence?
No, not a coincidence. I was not clever enough to come up with these stories, and nor could you come up with a more interesting fiction than their real-life experiences. My family moved to Southeast Florida when it was largely unpopulated other than by Seminole Indians, who of course had been at war with America for half of the 19th century. So my family moved into a very inhospitable area, and they had to carve an existence out of literally the jungle. And they had a lot of unique experiences, interactions with the Seminoles, learned their language, befriended them, brought the cultures together really for the first time, and developed the South Florida that we know today. We sold land to Henry Flagler. We watched the development of South Florida. Governor Broward was a friend of ours who the county is named after. So they had all these interesting real-life experiences that if you follow them through their experiences, you capture all of this history and geography and topography and where our place names come from. So it's a great lesson, particularly for our children and grandchildren, to enthrall them in an adventure story, but they unwittingly along the way learn all the history that we want them to learn.
Yeah, very clever. So let's hear a little about the book. What's kind of just a summary of The Last Egret?
Imagine a Huckleberry Finn or a Tom Sawyer, but instead of late 19th century Mississippi River, it's late 19th century Florida. So it's the adventures of young kids together, happen to be my family and their friends, as they set out on these really cool adventures around Florida when it looked a lot different than the Florida that we know today. And they battled the elements and hurricanes and wild animals. They discovered Spanish shipwrecks and buried gold treasure. And in the most recent book, and the one that won the book award, entitled The Last Egret, it's a very dark episode in American environmental history. It's a period in which millions of birds in the Florida Everglades were killed to feed the women's fashion industry because ladies, not only in the U.S. but throughout Europe, wanted to wear colorful plume feathers in their hats. And they never questioned where they were coming from, but they were coming from Florida, and they were being exterminated by the millions. And my family unknowingly participated in this terrible episode, and they spent much of the remainder of their lives trying to make amends for what they eventually realized they had participated in. So it has a very powerful conservation message, which I think in today's day and age, that message is just as important as the history and the place.
How did you, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but how did you manage to to send such a powerful message, but wrapped up into a children's book?
Well, that's the trick. I mean, the lucky part of it is I had the story laid out for me because it's a real life story. My family participated in it. It was well documented. So that part wasn't hard. It's building the dialogue and creating the characters around it that in such a manner that your reader wants to follow it. And these are teenage kids in the storyline, and the story is being read by teenagers or younger, and you have to have the same moral dilemmas and decisions and thoughts that go through the head of a modern child for them to relate to these children 120 years ago. So that's the tricky part.
Well, finally, I just wanted to ask you, obviously you have a deep-rooted passion for Florida's unique history. What does it mean to you to win an award for this book?
Oh, it's a great honor, obviously, and I've been very fortunate with this book. It's won several awards, and this may be the most important so far because it's the Florida Book Award. And Florida is a hotbed of writers these days. Not just these days, historically we have been, but there's a lot of great literature coming out of Florida at all levels today, and particularly children's literature. I was at a conference last week that had 20 or 30 authors of children's literature. Almost all of them were from Florida. So the competition is fierce, but it's good for us, the reader and the consumer, to have as much quality work coming out of Florida as we do today.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations again,
Thank you.
and thanks for
I appreciate
joining
it.
us.
Thank you.
Production of this program is made possible in part by a grant from the Florida Humanities Council. Additional support comes from the Florida State University Libraries.